Please click on the interpretation icon on the bottom right-hand side of the screen to select your preferred channel. Second, at the end of the panel, we hope to have some time for Q&A with our speakers, and we invite our audience today to participate using the Q&A function. So please don't be shy and send us your questions. Number three, we have a great lineup of speakers today, so I'll do my best as the moderator to keep track of time so that we can cover all the elements in the agenda. Having said that, I would like to thank our speakers in advance for keeping your interventions within the allotted timeframe. Finally, the webinar will be recorded. We hope you can all agree to this. So let's get ready for what promises to be a very interesting conversation on AI and COVID-19 in Latin America and the Caribbean. I hope you're all as excited as I am. I would now like to invite Mr. Andrew Wyckoff, Director of the Science, Technology and Innovation Directorate, and the Director of the Global Relations Secretariat, Mr. Andreas Schall, to give their opening remarks. Andy and Andreas, welcome to the webinar. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Luis. And good morning, good afternoon to all of our distinguished speakers and guests. It's great to be able to come together for our third in seminar series on digital transformation in the LAC region. And today, as Luis has just said, the focus is on AI in the time of COVID-19. Now, I'm just going to say a few brief remarks at the outset here and remind everyone.
This meeting is being recorded.
Is what we would call a general purpose technology. It's going to be everywhere, across every sector and across all facets of the economy and society. As such, it invokes a range of policy issues, everything from governance to privacy to data security to developing the right skills for impacts on consumer policy and implications on how markets function and national competitiveness. Another distinctive feature of AI, like many things digital, is they're born global and will present policy challenges that are really across our various borders. And sovereign, isolated approaches won't have much of an impact here. We need to work together internationally. This combination was really what motivated our work at the OECD, which went back to 2016, which in AI might as well have been decades ago, given how fast it's moving. From the start, the key challenge for us was how to maximize the benefits while minimizing the risks in a way that we can keep up with the rapid developments in this area. To meet this challenge, we adopted the first intergovernmental standard for the responsible stewardship of trustworthy AI in May of 2019 as ministers met at the OECD. These are the OECD Principles on Artificial Intelligence. And I'm really pleased to say that 6 countries in the LAC region, Argentina, Brazil, Costa Rica, Colombia, Mexico, Peru, have all adopted the principles. This is great because it's a sound basis in the region. Now, over the past year, I don't have to tell anyone, life has changed considerably. COVID has accelerated the already fast pace of the digital transformation. And we see it everywhere, from the teleconference today to the way we're changing how we work, to how our children learn, and how we shop for everyday goods. We also see that the role of AI has played in the crisis itself, from detecting and diagnosing the virus to helping us trace and track people who are infected, to accelerating research for vaccines and treatments. And that's the topic of today's webinar. And what we want to do is we want to talk a little bit about what we've learned at the OECD, but importantly, we want to learn from each other about the Latin American experience in deploying AI throughout the crisis. Now, don't have to tell anyone, times of crisis, the angst goes up, as does increased uncertainty. We just don't know what's going to be around the corner anymore. In this context, it's more important than ever to ensure that policymakers commit to design and to implement trustworthy AI systems. Only in this way can AI help alleviate and not accelerate existing inequalities in all of our societies. Now, with that, I want to pass the word to our distinguished panel speakers, but start off with my colleague, Andreas Schall, Director of OECD's Global Relations Secretary, for his brief remarks. Andreas.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Luis. Hola, buenos dias, or hola, buenas tardes, wherever you are in listening and joining us in this third webinar of a series that follows our Latin American Caribbean Ministerial Summit on Digital Transformation in Colombia last year. These respective sessions we are conducting are, just a second, are aimed to provide policymakers with insight and strategies to help leverage the digital transformation to unlock greater productivity and more inclusive growth in the region, which are the two pillars in our LUC program: productivity, inclusive growth, and integrity. We will hold one more of these webinars in the following weeks on the role of digital transformation to promote an inclusive and sustainable recovery, based on the Development Center's Latin American Economic Outlook 2020, and one more on the digitalization of SMEs in 2021. Last year at this ministerial summit, you all recognized that there are significant imbalances between people, companies, and sectors in the face of digitalization and artificial intelligence in all continents, and even within countries' own frontiers. This is a critical aspect to bring to the table, especially when talking about Latin America, where inequality has been a pervasive challenge for many years. The COVID-19 crisis has brought those structural weaknesses even further to light in Latin America and elsewhere. It has been a catalyst of development of structural weaknesses in many countries. On the bright side, it has also accelerated many promising trends. For example, it has forced us individuals and countries to jump into the pool of the digital transformation, boosting our use and embedding digital tools in everything we do. These webinars are a real life example. And I'm speaking to you from Potsdam, close to Berlin, whereas Andy and the other colleagues are in Paris, and we are reaching out to all over the world and to many countries in Latin America. As this background note for the discussion highlights, artificial intelligence can be a powerful ally in helping governments tackle complex challenges, such as the COVID-19 health crisis. In fact, artificial intelligence is already being utilized in some LAC countries to diagnose COVID cases, identify counterfeit medicines, and even detect corruption along the supply chains. So, fantastic new tool in technologies addressing many areas of public policies. Yet we know that the potential of AI stretches way beyond the crisis, and it can support governments in a more effectively designing and implementing policies for the recovery, particularly through nudges for what regards public service delivery. As AI and blockchain play a major role in the development of machine learning, it is also key for making companies more productive and economies at large more able to benefit from the data revolution. In addition, and needless to stress, that at times of lockdowns and confinements, digitalization and artificial intelligence can contribute to making economies and companies more resilient. And also they are a source for all of us taking part into our professional and personal day-to-day life and interactions. You will thus perfectly understand that digitalization and artificial intelligence cannot be an option only. They must be mainstream in policy making, administration, and in the private sector. And that's what we are going to talking about today. Today, we have a great panel of experts from Chile, from Brazil, Mexico, as well as 3 other partner institutions, the IDB, CAF, and the European Commission. And we may have even as a special guest our former Chief of Staff, Gabriela Ramos, who is the Assistant Secretary General of the UNESCO for Human and Social Sciences, responsible for artificial intelligence. They will discuss ways of ensuring this mainstreaming and making the most of AI. I take this opportunity to thank all of you, all the panelists personally, for their engagement and participation. There are already strong drivers in the digital transformation in the region. The Fair Luck initiative of the IDB for ethical and socially beneficial AI is a critical project already connected to the OECD's AI Observatory. CAF is promoting ambitious projects to financially support physical and digital integration in the region. And the European Commission has supported this process and fostered the dialogue through the EU Facility for Development in Transition. I very much look forward hearing to you from countries, from institutions here today, how you are envisaging, how you are already harnessing AI to fight the pandemic, what you see as the remaining policy challenge to make AI take up more effective and inclusive. Count on the OECD, count on the OECD's LAC regional program to support the region in overcoming these challenges and paving the way for a strong and inclusive recovery. With that, dear Luis, I give the floor back to you and declare the Olympic Games on Artificial Intelligence in Latin America open. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy and Andreas, for setting the stage for this webinar. Underscoring, of course, the opportunities that artificial intelligence could bring to the LAC region, but also the implementation challenges that could sometimes make AI seem somewhat like work in progress, right, in the fight against COVID-19. Thank you again for that. Just a quick note here to thank all the people following this webinar live on YouTube. Big thanks for joining. It is my pleasure now to introduce Karine Perset, Administrator of the OECD AI Policy Observatory. Karine will present some of the work on AI policy that the OECD has conducted so far, with a focus on COVID-19. Karine, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Luis, and greetings to all. Before starting, I'd like to give special thanks to our superstars here, Luis Aranda and Kelsey Burns, for putting together such a great panel today. And also thank our comms team and our colleagues from the Global Relations Secretariat. So I'll give a quick overview of recent OECD work on AI with a particular focus on how we've applied this work to the COVID-19 pandemic. I do have a slide deck. I hope you can see it. Let me know if you can't.
We can.
Okay,
we can.
Fantastic. So first I'll talk about the OECD AI principles. Second, tell you about how we're helping to implement these principles, i.e., bring them to life and make them useful. And then tell you about some COVID-19 resources we've been working on and how they relate to the Latin American context. So the OECD principles were adopted last May 2019 by OECD members and partner countries, and then also endorsed by the G20 in June last year. These principles are non-binding, but they do come with a very strong political commitment by signatories to implement them in their national policies, and there is also monitoring by the OECD. So this map illustrates the broad commitment to the principles, with the areas in blue showing the countries that have committed to them. And as you can see, many Latin American countries have endorsed them and are using them. But this map also shows the need to reach out to regions like Africa, which you see in gray, and where our partnerships with UNESCO and then also IDB and other institutions with complementary mandates and memberships are really critical. So these are the 10 principles for trustworthy AI. And what they really are is a prioritization by governments of the most important qualities that AI systems should feature. The 5 first are values-based principles, and the later 5 are policy recommendations addressed to national governments. So you might be wondering, how are these principles relevant to the pandemic? well, to fully leverage AI to combat COVID-19, policymakers must really ensure that AI systems are trustworthy and aligned with these principles. This means they should respect human rights and privacy, be transparent, explainable, robust, secure, and safe, and actors involved in their development and use should remain accountable. And policymakers must, and often do, encourage the use of AI in research on COVID. They're helping make available data and compute capacity for AI COVID applications and building skills. So these are key findings from much of the OECD's work in the area over the past few months. So what have we been doing to help implement the AI principles that you can see in red at the center? Last February 2020, we launched the OECD AI Policy Observatory, which is an online platform to provide resources on one, implementing the principles in practice, two, AI in policy areas from agriculture to development to tax to SMEs, three, trends in data, and that's a really strong focus area for us, and four, data on national AI policies and stakeholder initiatives. So the three circles that you see around the AI Policy Observatory are networks of experts. So groups of experts on AI with different focus areas. The one on the left is the OECD Network of Experts on AI, and this is a multi-stakeholder group that is developing policy implementation guidance for the AI principles. Next is the Global Partnership on AI that was launched quite recently in June 2020 under the leadership of France and Canada. And its goal is to advance cutting-edge research and pilot projects on AI priorities. And so we're hosting part of its secretariat. Last but not least, at the bottom is the OECD Parliamentary Group on AI, which is a large network of legislators across the world working on AI. And we're participating in critical and complementary initiatives by partner institutions, particularly UNESCO and Council of Europe, and of course the European Commission, as well as IDB and several others. And all of these initiatives have established dedicated efforts in some form or another to address the issues raised by the pandemic. So here, I'm just going to dive quickly into the efforts by our network of experts on AI to develop policy implementation guidance for the AI principles. And through three working groups that are focusing on one, developing a classification framework to help policymakers assess what types of AI systems raise what types of policy issues. Their AI systems come in many, many different shapes and forms and raise completely different issues. And a very much more fine-grained, nuanced understanding of these is really important before, so that we're able to successfully address the challenges some of them pose and leverage the opportunities that others pose. So the second priority is identifying the tools to help AI actors and decision makers implement trustworthy AI through process-based approaches like corporate governance and risk management approaches, to technical approaches such as standards and certification schemes and technical research programs, and three, educational and awareness building approaches. So the third priority, which is the bottom bubble, is practical guidance on national AI policies, such as governance of AI policies, R&D, and skills. Now I'll focus on the topic of today, on our coronavirus-related resources, particularly those on OECD.ai. So first is a framework to classify AI systems by how they help at AI systems used to combat, to help address COVID-19 challenges, by how they help at the different stages of the crisis management process, from detection, such as early warning or detection systems, prevention, which includes prediction of contagion, surveillance tools, or or infodemics fighting tools. Third, response. And here we mean delivery systems or service automation like chatbots, and recovery, which includes systems to monitor the economic recovery. And finally, using AI to accelerate research across the whole process. So in terms of data, we've developed a COVID-19 tracker and live data on coronavirus-related research publications, which allows you to follow COVID news and events as it happens, and can be filtered by country. You can track the evolution of the pandemic by country, here Mexico, for example. Another stream of work we've been working on is coronavirus-related research, and there obviously is an explosion over the past few months, so we're not going to reach it. So there you go. There's the explosion happening, and it's probably going to continue, but it will be very interesting to watch trends unfold. Here you can see collaboration within and between countries on AI research, particularly Brazil as an example, and within and between institutions. Another feature just to mention is that we recently launched the AI Wonk, which really brings together expert views on the use of AI in various applications, and has quite a few posts that pertain to coronavirus. With that, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Corinne, for a very insightful presentation and for what seems to be a great segue to kick off our panel. So with this, I would like to propose that we move on to the panel. It is an honor for me to present the distinguished panelists today, who will provide a perspective from all over the LAC region on how artificial intelligence technologies have been applied in different contexts to fight the COVID pandemic. So we would like to have 2 rounds of interventions today. So let's try to stick to the 4 minutes for the first question, and if it's okay with everyone, of course. Let us start with Cristina Pombo. Cristina, one second. Cristina is the Principal Advisor and Head of the Digital and Data Cluster, Social Sector from the Inter-American Development Bank. Cristina, bienvenida, welcome. Now, Cristina, thank you. Question for you. In April 2020, the IDB and CityBeats announced a partnership to analyze millions of public opinions across 26 Latin American countries. And you did this by creating a real-time dashboard on social needs using AI technologies, of course, with a focus on the COVID pandemic. Could you tell us more about how governments in the region or other organizations could use AI and machine learning to better respond to citizens' needs during the pandemic, for example, by listening to public opinion in real time, like the IDB and CityBeats are doing?
Thank you, Luis, and thank you, Andy and Andrea, for inviting me here, and Karin for all the great partnership we have with the OECD Observatory. And for my fellow panelists, it's an honor to be here as well. So thank you for the question, Luis. It's very interesting because currently societies are increasingly digitized, and technologies such as big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning represent a new opportunities for sure to addressing challenges such as the design of more sustainable, inclusive, and collaborative societies. And governments are increasingly adopting more data-driven approaches when making public policy decisions. And thanks to the massive use of social networks, social listening, it's a new tool to know better citizens' opinions and understand their needs. The pandemic it's a real threat for all of us, as Andy and as Andreas said at the beginning, has changed everything, of course. And that is why it is very important to understand the different perceptions and then realize that the role of citizen participation is critical in crafting those public policies. For example, using CityBeats, and that's a great platform to social listening, the perceptions and the sentiment around what is happening. we found that the Argentinians seems to be more prone to solidarity initiatives, while Peruvians are mainly concerned about the government measures adopted to deal with the pandemic. Chileans and Uruguayans fear most about the threats to the economy, to the economic stability of their countries and businesses, for example. Such diverse scenarios indicate the importance of using evidence-based targeted actions for social needs. And another example is how to use this technology then. Now that you know what are the perceptions and you have a different ideas, we can measure social comments about inequality before and after the pandemic, for example, and we did that with City Beats as well. Let's not forget that before the pandemic, we were coming from a lot of protests in Chile, in Ecuador, in Haiti, in Colombia, and at the core of those protests were a lot of this social unrest and the inequalities citizens were facing. So what we did is what we saw is that people are more worried now on those issues of inequality. The conversation has multiplied by 10 when talking about inequalities, and we also know that countries and which countries and what topics are more mentioned. In Colombia, in Chile, in El Salvador, in Mexico, they are talking about health, jobs, education. They are using different words than before. And thanks to the ethical use of these tools and the artificial intelligence behind these tools, we can understand in real time the needs and the opinion of citizens. So it helps institutions and policymakers to drive not only informed and appropriate policies and decisions, but also those that include citizen voices. Knowing the needs and the concerns of citizens contributes for sure in the short term to improve decision making. And in the medium term, I think finding consensus in the scenarios for exciting the crisis, both at the level of government, startups, companies, civil society, organization, and citizens. I don't know if I'm used the 4 minutes or not, but these are my ideas around this amazing tool and how you can reflect it in the region.
Thank you, Christina. 4 minutes sharp, very nice. It's very nice to hear about these social listening tools that use machine learning in Latin America. Definitely a great illustration of how governments could also use them to listen to public opinion. Now, please allow me to introduce Mr. José Guntillo, Director of the Department of Science, Technology, and Digital Innovation from the Brazilian Secretariat for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. Director Guntillo, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, Director Guntillo, Brazil has a very interesting national AI strategy where the government has committed to a network of, I think, 8 AI labs around Brazil that cover strategic areas that include things like cybersecurity and defense, for instance. My question to you is, what has been the role of these 8 AI labs to support Brazil's fight against COVID-19? And let me add something else. What role has the Santos Dumont supercomputer played in this, if any, of course?
Oh, thank you, Luis. Thank you. My pleasure. Good afternoon to all my colleagues in this panel. It's a pleasure to be here. First of all, we established a national AI strategy. We make a public consultant, and we think that it must be an approach seeking the trustworthy and the ethical approach, OECD principles, and so, as you mentioned earlier. And looking specifically regarding the COVID, I will start from the Santos Dumont, then I go to the centers. Santos Dumont, in the first days of the pandemic, it made a fast COVID genome sequencing with 19 types of virus. And this speed up a lot of researchers, such as medicine, such as many ways to deal with the problem. And since then, we have been using it as a public infrastructure that any R&D institutions in Brazil can find a free slot and work on it to solve some issue regarding COVID. Regarding the centers, there are many actions on AI in Brazil. All of those are attached to the AI strategy. The call for the 8 centers, there are eight centers, one for industry, one for health, one for agribusiness, for cities, defense, public security, and so on. It's undergoing the selection of those centers, but the centers have been organized by themselves to submit the proposal. So they're already working on these issues, and many interesting things happen, such as we analyze around 2,000 molecules from regular medicines that are already in the pharmacy, and we choose 4. Then we did laboratory tests. Then we have just finished the clinical testing with 1,500 volunteers, and then we find that one specific one reduce the virus level of contamination, and then it together with the other ones can be some kind of cocktail that can help to feed the COVID. We also have in the beginning some initiatives regarding mapping agglomeration of people, but there is some LGBT, GDPR issues, and the society do not receive those initiatives very well, and the government do not get on this track. We have also initiatives using AI to track and also to diagnostic COVID, such as X-ray or tomography. And we have also AI initiatives, R&D projects that are already being used by the hospitals to do tests without reagents using AI and the cloud and using this kind of process. So there are many initiatives. All those groups, most part of them submitted to be one of the 8 AI centers in Brazil. The 4 first will be announced probably by December. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gontijo. It's very interesting, the Brazilian experience with creating the AI strategy. I think it would be also interesting for other governments as they start to form their strategies as well, especially with these AI centers. So I'd like to get back to that if we have the time. But so far we've heard from an international organization and the government. I would like to hear from an NGO now. So let me introduce to you Constanza Gomez-Montt. She's the founder and CEO of C-Minds, a woman-led action tank working at the intersection of new technology, society, and the environment. Constanza, you're also part of the high-level expert groups of the UNESCO, the IDB, the IEEE, and the WEF on AI for Humanity. Bienvenida, Constanza.
Gracias, Luis.
Now, Constanza, in crises like this one, Latin American governments cannot and should not do everything alone. In particular, I think we all agree that the support of all the different stakeholders is needed to design and implement a winning strategy against COVID-19. In this sense, and based on your experience with C-Minds so far, what is the role of an NGO in helping to fight against the pandemic by using emerging technologies like artificial intelligence?
So basically, in times of humanitarian crisis like these, we need every sector to bring their best resources to the table. And definitely the role of NGOs, and especially action tanks such as C-Minds and many others, is key mainly in my belief in 2 ways. The first is by providing agility to accelerate the development of ethics-based tools that respond to immediate needs for pandemic management. Let me tell you a story of what C-Minds is doing on this. We are an action tank, as you say, and one of the questions that has driven our work for the last 5 years is how can we accelerate the use of AI technologies for social good in Mexico and other countries in Latin America in a responsible way that does not create greater inequalities, especially in our region. So here comes COVID early this year, and basically we're all asking the same question. One is how can we keep ourselves safe? And the second is how can we add a meaningful value from all of our institutions, from all of our sectors, from all of our key niches. For C-Minds, we got together with our partners and advisors, and to really think about this question: how can an action tank add value to this unprecedented pandemic? We saw that data tracking for disease spread was already covered by many entities. But we had the question, what if we could help health institutions in the process to advance the discovery of prevention and treatment mechanisms? We realized that clinical trials, especially in our region, were not as agile and effective as they could be. The real-time data analysis, the trial participant management, and the adoption of state-of-the-art ethical practices on privacy and transparency was missing so many things. Also, we found that it was difficult for similar clinical trials to share results and collaborate in a more effective way that secured privacy for the users and participants. In times where we need the most effective and agile processes and the most rights-based collaborative mechanisms for clinical trials, we're still using, in many cases, paper for data collection, Excel for data analysis, and email attachments with no much care for personal data. We decided here to develop Talaria, which is an AI-based support system for clinical trials, receiving a grant from google.org to make it happen. Basically, in very few words, it will help clinical trials, mostly in the region, to one, have a state-of-the-art digital tools to share, track, and capture information. Second, to harness the power of machine learning to analyze and understand patterns in a more effective and agile way. 3, to take advantage of chatbot and natural language processing to connect more effectively with the patients in the trial. And 4th, and most importantly, to integrate the highest standards of privacy and other ethical considerations in a more seamlessly way. We're developing it hand in hand with promising clinical trials actually in Chile and soon Mexico, because we want to make sure that whatever we develop, and that's a responsibility of anyone who develops technology for a crisis like this and in any other situation, that it is based in real needs and that it has ethics at the core. And moreover, it will be an open source, and that's the power of NGOs. We think always, our nature is to think about collaborations, and our nature is to think about how can we make knowledge accessible for the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time. In our case, we will make all the code and all the information open for other institutions to be able to adopt these technologies. And summing it up, the role, and which I believe is key of NGOs to work together with other sections and other sectors, is because one, we bring agility to the table and a very fast execution of needs that are emergent, such in the context as COVID. Second, our collaborative and open nature make us more prone to collaborations cross countries in times where collaborations are needed the most. And most importantly, a very pragmatic approach to an ethics-based development of tools and paradigms that allow us to rethink what are the social structures, both for AI and in the pandemic, and also in a great need of human needs and human rights to be at the center of conversations.
Oh, thank you, Constanza. Definitely refreshing to see actors from civil society in LAC taking the initiative and contributing to the efforts to get out of and, of course, recover from the pandemic as quickly as possible. Now, I think this is a reminder to all that Latin America's most valuable asset are its people, and there is great potential. Now, let's hear from Chile. We have with us today Mr. Jose Antonio Guridi, advisor to the Minister of Science, Technology, Knowledge and Innovation in Chile. Jose Antonio, welcome. Jose Antonio, question for you. Chile has taken a bit of a democratic approach to develop its national AI strategy, basing it on consultations with many different stakeholders, including the academic sector, the private sector, civil society, and so on. Based on this experience, how is the Chilean government engaging the private and academic sector and civil society to face the COVID-19 challenges together, in particular, perhaps through the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Well, first, thanks for inviting me and share this amazing panel. In fact, the participation process on our AI policy is something that we are using not only for AI, but for everything that we are doing at the Ministry of Science. We are a ministry that is 1 year old, so we are installment has happened at the same time of COVID and at the same time of the social riots in Chile. We started operating officially at the 1st of October, and the social riots started the 18th of October. So we have only 2 normal weeks. And from that, we for example, had our policy, our scientific policy, science and technology policy, published a couple of days ago, and it was also constructed through open roundtables, the same as the AI strategy. And the idea here is that we know and we believe that knowledge and the technical expertise is completely distributed, and we will not find any answer by doing policy only in the government. And one thing that we've done through the months of the pandemic is to get all the enabling factors that we believe that people need to help to fight COVID. And we created a roundtable of a data roundtable to gather all the data possible in an open and interoperable way. So all the universities, research centers, and industry could collaborate with data, with models and everything. And that's been very hard work, but right now we have more than 70 different data products, and those data products are open for anyone who wants to use them. They are updated daily or weekly, depending on the product, and they are not only about the pandemic itself. We have a lot of health data, but we are also some complementary data set, for example, from the Ministry of Transportation and private industry, and some academic groups that are using models to build mobility data, and we have environmental data, and all that data combined has helped us to make better decisions, and also for different areas like universities to contribute with more elaborated models. And that sounds like only something that enables the ecosystem, but it's been really hard work since before this roundtable. All the data was in silos in the academic sector or in firms. There were not agreements even inside the public sector to transfer data from one government or from one ministry to the other. And the effort right now and the COVID itself has pushed us to make these agreements, make a lot of ad hoc agreements to transfer data, to create a standard and to make this data available. And this has also permitted us to develop some initiatives for aiming specific problems using AI, for example. And we have models for predicting how different indicators for the COVID that helps us to take decisions on which sector to go into quarantine or not. And also we have some initiatives that go in parallel with this data roundtable that aims, for example, on the economic impact. And the Ministry of Economy has an AI software that helps SMEs to connect with people and to first for the social riots and after for the pandemic. And we have some, for example, hospitals using images recognition to help diagnosis and everything. But I think that the main effort that we have done from the Chilean government is to open data as much as possible and to have the best data possible for academic groups and industry to contribute to fight the pandemic.
Very nice. Thank you, Jose Antonio. I've seen the dashboard that the Chilean government created and to fight COVID, of course, and it's quite impressive. So good practices coming from Chile. Perhaps the other governments in the region could find informative. Let's go back now to the regional level. We're happy to have Maria Isabel Mejia with us today. Maria Isabel is a senior executive in the Digital Innovation in Government Directorate of the Development Bank of Latin America, or the CAF, as most of us know it. Welcome, Maria Isabel. Gracias por acompañarnos.
Hola, Luis.
Hola, Maria Isabel. Maria Isabel, in May, the CAF launched a call for AI projects that aims at solving public challenges in Latin American cities, with reportedly 89 submissions from a wide variety of countries. We're curious to hear, and I think our audience will appreciate it, about those submissions, including any insights you may have about the maturity of AI use and implementation in the public sector in Latin America. Now, did any of those submissions include proposals to use AI technologies in particular to address COVID-related challenges?
Yes, thank you, Luis. Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. I'm really honored to be here. The call that was made within the framework of an initiative led by CAF, whose objective is to promote the strategic use of data and AI in the public sector to generate social and economic value in Latin America. The call was made to cities and municipalities of CAF's partner countries to present projects that contributes to solving public problems through the strategic use of data and AI. The response to the call shows very interesting indications of what is happening in the region around the issue. First of all, it is worth noting the number and origin of the proposals that were received, which shows the great interest of the municipalities and cities of the region in developing this type of projects that seek to improve public management, transparency, and service to the citizens. A total, as you said, a total of 89 projects were received from 70 cities and municipalities from 11 countries in the region. Colombia, Argentina, and Ecuador were the countries that presented the largest number of proposals. The diversity of the topics addressed by the proposals is immense, which shows that artificial intelligence is a transversal technology that can contribute to the solution of multiple public problems. We can categorize the received proposals as follows. Projects to improve the formulation, execution, and evaluation of public policies, with initiatives related to innovation and productive development, care for the environment, attention to natural disasters. For example, in Colombia, one was about supporting for victims of the armed conflict in Colombia and well-being of adult population. The second category was projects to improve the design and delivery of services to citizens and companies, with solutions for citizen service through chatbots, health, citizen security, justice, transit, and collection and transportation of hazardous sanitary waste, for example. And the third category was projects to improve the internal management of the states, for highlighting initiatives related to procurement, public procurement and contracting. The potential for scaling up and replication that this type of projects have is also significant, not only in the country that develops it, but in other countries in the region and the world that face similar challenges. I want to give you two examples. The winning proposal that was presented by La Veeduría Distrital de Bogotá is like the district oversight of Bogotá. I don't know how to translate that. It was about artificial intelligence for the prediction of irregularities and inefficiencies in public procurement. That was the winning proposal, and but we highlighted another one presented by the municipality of San Martín of the province of Buenos Aires, Argentina, and it was about COVID. It's an intelligent early warning system to detect early infections, foci of or potential epidemic outbreaks from collective behaviors. That was a very interesting proposal also. Maybe on the next section, I can go deeper on the level of maturity of the projects and the questions that arose from the analysis we did.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. We'll get to that. So right now, then let me go today with our last panelist of this round, Massimo Craglia. Massimo is the lead scientist at the Digital Economic Unit of the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. Massimo Benvenuto, great to have you with us today.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes, Max. Earlier this year, the Joint Research Center released a report called Artificial Intelligence and Digital Transformation, Early Lessons from the COVID-19 Crisis, and I encourage everyone to take a look at it. But I believe you're one of the authors of this report. Today, as we all know very well, some European countries are being hit by a second wave of COVID-19 cases. Could you please tell us more about the early lessons that were included in the report? And if you had the chance to rewrite the report, are there any other lessons about the use of AI against the pandemic that you would like to add? Again, if you could go back in time.
Well, thank you very much, Luis. Indeed, I work at the Joint Research Center. For those who are not familiar, this is the directorate of the European Commission that does the science and technology research to support the policy of the Union. And one of the many areas, of course, is artificial intelligence. So we have developed an observatory for artificial intelligence, AI Watch, that we do in collaboration with Karine and colleague in OECD, of course, particularly for the parts related to national policies. So we look at many issues, including a lot of applications of AI in the public sector, in different economic sectors, the global landscape, etc. And in May, we were asked essentially to start having a look and say, well, what impact has the COVID crisis had on the development of the AI, on the uptake of the AI? And so we did this first report, and we looked, of course, at the area of medicine and medical care in general, but also what were the broader issues about the changes in data sharing, the debate about contact tracing and the ethics about it, innovation, resilience, cybersecurity. So we tried to span across different areas. So what have we learned? Clearly, in a way, AI has acted as a booster. It has acted as a booster for the adoption of artificial intelligence. We have seen already, I think Karine was mentioning that there has been clearly a significant increase in research using artificial intelligence to address the COVID-related issues, but also in generally medical care. And to be honest, sometimes the relatively very important, but maybe less glamorous applications, like the handling of patients, the flow of patients going to hospitals, the chatbots to address some of the questions that people have. So there's a lot of just management that is hugely important, particularly at the time of crisis and scarce resources. But of course, there are also applications that are more related to particular issues to do with image recognition, with the analysis of genetic data for development of vaccines, and in general for medical care. So a whole range of applications that in a way have been augmented by the crisis. At the same time, we have seen also some broader issues. For example, we clearly always had in Europe, but I imagine that everywhere, the difficulty of accessing data from the commercial sector. I mean, whilst we have been pushing open data, open government, and open public sector data for decades, accessing commercial data has always been very tricky. But the good thing is that because of the crisis, the commercial companies, for example, the telecommunication companies, have really collaborated with us to provide access to anonymized data so that we could do some of the modeling, some of the analysis. And that, I think, has been good news. Clearly, the crisis has also, as you have seen, particularly the lockdowns, of which we are going into another phase, has brought everybody online. So in a way that has, at one level, we have looked at the sort of robustness of the internet to keep up to this. But also, in a way, it has accelerated some processes like the modernization of public administration or education online that have been sort of kind of for decades being talked about and sort of kind of dragged along. And immediately they, all of a sudden we were all pushed into this, unprepared in many cases. And so there was a lot of lessons to be learned. We have also seen a lot of cases of innovation, particularly I think we were talking about the colleagues from Brazil about the issues of GDPR and the modeling. we have tried to use a lot of synthetic data, synthetic populations, so create statistical avatars of the real people, but with the real distribution of variables in order to try to do the modeling and understanding a relative risk of infection of different economic sector, the mobility, and so all these issues related to opening or closing the economy in different sectors. So we are trying to do a lot of this detail, and a lot of digital twins of cities and regions is becoming one of the major tools. It has created obviously a lot of opportunities for companies that are already digital. We have seen that particularly the big sort of corporation and platforms have made a lot of money out of the crisis. So clearly some companies have done extremely well. There has been a lot of difficulties for a lot of companies and a lot of people, particularly during the lockdown. And clearly we have seen a huge increase in campaigns of organized campaign of misinformation against vaccines, fake news about COVID. And artificial intelligence, in a way, is a dual-edged sword because it facilitates the generation of this fake news, but it also helps to detect them and trying to stop them. So it acts both ways. One thing that I think I would like to mention, just as in closing, is that what we have seen, though, as well, is that particularly the closing down and the moving of education online instead of face-to-face at school has exacerbated inequalities. And so in particularly young people and children have had it very hard. Even in wealthy Europe, 30% of school children do not have access to their own IT devices, do not have an independent place to study, do not often have the support of the parents enough to supplement the not going to school. So there are issues related to education. Of course, the elderly have been massively hit. And in general, all the more vulnerable groups in societies, they have felt the distance with the rest of society increase. So we have seen a widening gap in society as a result of the COVID directly, but also indirectly as a result of the response to the COVID. And I think that is something that is an important issue that we need to address.
Yeah, the issue with education, the issues there, I think they're present in Europe, but also, of course, in Latin America. So it's very relevant. It's very interesting what you mentioned also about the synthetic data. So a quick question, will we see a sequel of this report anytime soon?
Well, I mean, there's what I'll do. I will put on the question and answer panel the link to AI Watch, because you know it's an area where we are developing a lot of resources, where everything that we do is of course public, and where you will see as we progress all of these developments that and these reports made available to everyone. So
okay, that works. That works perfect. Thank you so much, Massimo. And now very quickly, because we're getting short on time here, I would like to go to the second round of questions. And I would like to ask all panelists about their learnings in this fight against COVID-19. Of course, I think our audience would like to hear not only the successes, but also the things that you think could have been done better from your respective angles. Now, for this question, I'm going to ask you to stick to 2 minutes. So just a couple of points, if I may. Christina, we'll start again with you. Just real quick, the IDB has set up 4 FAIRLAC hubs in the region. Could you give us 2 learnings from these concrete efforts in the field that could probably help other international organizations or government promote the use of AI against COVID-19?
Thank you, Luis. A little bit of context really quick. FAIRLAC hubs are an ecosystem within a country that could advance in this promotion and use of artificial intelligence, given they're having the right conditions, all the experiments of the pilots that we are developing. 4 FAIRLACs, one is in Uruguay, the other one is Costa Rica, third one is Jalisco in Mexico, and we launched the 4th in Medellin, Colombia. So answering your question, I think the main the main highlight for us, or the main takeaway from us is how to go from principles to practice. It's super easy, but it's super easy to say, I have these principles. I can adapt to these principles. How you can operationalize those principles. So for us, first, it's very important not failing for solutionism, understanding what is the real problem. COVID-19 is a real problem. So you have to see what are the things you wanna address with AI. So AI, it's another tool to fight the pandemic. Too much trust on its capabilities could lead to the wrong decisions with regards to development, to financing, and to adoption, non-proven or non-well-proven solutions. So be really careful with that. Quality of the data. Lack of that quality could bring weak solutions, and since we're talking about health data, even deadly solutions. So the quality of the data it's very important. Another key element or the lesson learned that we've seen is the effectiveness of the technology solution. Once it's decided what is the problem, then you can think about the technological model, if it's AI or another solution that is the most appropriate for the country. The relevance of local realities when deploying any initiative of AI is key. And the last thing, Luis, is that artificial intelligence did not fulfill its promise during COVID-19, but not because it was a failure. But because the pandemic presented the challenge of making large estimations without good data. So now Latin America and the Caribbean has an amazing opportunity to do the things right and the right things. So let's use that opportunity to start making these principles into practice.
Very nice. Thank you, Christina. You know, on that last point, I read a couple of weeks ago on the Financial Times an opinion piece that ended by saying this might not be the first pandemic to be solved by AI, but it will for sure be the last one to be solved without it. So we can discuss that, but let me move over to our next speaker, Director Gontijo. Could you mention two learnings from Brazil, real quick? Maybe again one success and one situation that could have been done better. For that, it would probably serve for policymakers in the region as they prepare to use AI to fight the pandemic.
Yeah, what we have, first of all, I guess the pandemic shows the best and the worst characteristic from the human being, right? I guess everyone worldwide passed through this. And we as public policy and government, we know that and we never forgot who helps and who do not help and so on. Everyone knows that. And I guess this will be a learn on how can the government and the private sector can work very good in to solve a huge problem for our country, for the world. And you get companies that never work with health and starts to manufacture ventilators, and it works very well. 16,000 were 100% manufactured in Brazil and put in the hospitals. And the other one is why we did that. There is the learning that the public policy that we made in the past. Every time we receive the question regarding why Brazil is doing this policy, why Brazil is doing that policy. And we have the answer regarding the technological sovereignty. So we need this to have the readiness for this right moment. And our minister used to say, it's not if it will happen again, and it's when it will happen. So we have to keep this readiness state always organized. And we know with this partnership between the public and private sector, how can organize all those stakeholders in a fast way to solve the issues. I guess this is what we learned. There are very good companies and good people in the country that can help to solve huge problems in Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gontijo. Constanza, your turn now. Again, two learnings. How can governments not only support, but also incentivize the efforts of civil society and NGOs to use AI responsibly?
First, the power to enable more policy prototypes as a way to create safe and collaborative spaces to test AI governance before the development of soft and hard regulations. For example, there is a great need to develop the mechanisms that ensure, as we all well know, trusted AI systems. Companies should be able nowadays to answer the questions participants and users and stakeholders have that are quite important. For example, for how long the traceability app will stay with my data while they're using it. What will happen after with my personal data? Why am I getting this treatment recommendations? Among many other questions that are key in this pandemic context. And one way to achieve this is to create more transparency and explicability for companies. And we do have to ask ourselves as a society, how can we create a framework and a regulatory mechanism to make this happen in the most effective and agile way? And most importantly, how can we do it together with the industry and together with international organizations? In this sense, actually, we're working with Cristina Pompo and her team on a policy prototyping, working with 14 companies in Mexico to test what does it mean to have a framework on transparency and explicability, and working with the authorities in Mexico to promote and to develop a national framework on this that will be published next year, hopefully inspiring other actors. And the second role that is quite important, and this role we could talk for hours, is how government can amplify existing efforts. Massimo actually touched a very important topic for us, children, these vulnerable populations. How can we have the governments amplify these regional protocols on how to protect children's rights? With the Inter-American Development Bank, actually, we're working on a guides for schools. And in the next months, we will be publishing a policy report with recommendations. And the governments will be key to make these recommendations happen on a regional level.
Thank you very much, Constanza. José Antonio, me paso contigo. Chile has developed, as you mentioned, the data visualization dashboard with a lot of data points. How has this effort using data science and machine learning helped to manage the pandemic? But most importantly, what are the learnings in your opinion? Again, 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, I'll try to be short. I think that the main learning is that knowledge is indeed distributed, and the technical expertise was not confined on one university or on the government or on a specific firm. It was necessary to make firms, different universities, and the government to collaborate. Many times competitors collaborate among them. So it's kind of a radical collaboration to face the pandemic. And I think that's the main learning is that is possible, and it was only a matter of trust and a matter of need. And I hope that for the future, we will be prepared to collaborate in this way to face a future pandemic or any other thing. And the main learning, I think, is related to that, is we were not prepared to do that collaboration. At the beginning, it was difficult to sit all the actors together and to really build the trust needed to collaborate and to transfer data and to make data available. And it was a really rough way the first 2 months, I think. And also, I think that's something that should change at an institutional level, and we should be prepared to really have this collaboration in an easy way the next time we need it. And at the same time, I think that something very important also related with trust is that we have to learn to communicate better. And I think that's something that's been a problem all over the world on how to communicate news about COVID and how to communicate everything about COVID. And for example, when we were improving our data set and we were making technical changes to the data and improving the way we were measuring, a lot of time it was really bad received, because they thought that we were committing errors. And the only thing that we were doing is improving the data and making it even better than before to be more trustworthy. And many people thought we were only lying or hiding data or something. And really, I think that all the communication part on how we were improving the data should be improved for the future.
Very Nice. So collaboration and communication. Don't wait for the crisis to start them. Okay, so thank you, Jose Antonio. Maria Isabel, your turn. Based on your experience with the projects that you mentioned, and you mentioned you wanted to discuss maturity of AI use in the public sector, two learnings from the projects and how you see this maturity happening.
Bueno, Luis, esta vez voy a hablar en español.
No problem. We have
Okay, Luis, this time I'll be speaking Spanish.
This is the time to do it.
Nosotros en el llamado que hicimos habíamos pedido que los
In the
proyectos
call for tenders we published, we asked that these projects be at a stage where the project was in the implementation phase, meaning that they had already undergone the design, pilot, or concept testing, and 20% of the projects that were set forth complied with this criteria, meaning that they were in the implementation phase. And we wondered why often in Latin America we don't go beyond pilot projects, because we're always carrying out pilot projects, but we never go very far beyond that. And so what we wondered was if there was a risk aversion in the public sector, or if there was a lack of talent or a culture of constantly creating or innovating, or limited capabilities when it comes to funding or resources. But what we decided was that we need to go beyond pilot programs. And I think this is what is at stake. We need to move towards trust. And I'd like to stress what several of you have already said. I believe that using AI needs to be centered on human beings and on respect for human rights. We need to achieve citizens' trust in what the government is doing with artificial intelligence. And to do so, I'd like to stress what Jose Antonio just said. Governments need to be transparent. They need to explain what data they're using, for how long, what will they do with it, how long they'll be keeping it, and have an ethical framework that isn't just based on principles, because we can agree on principles, but it also has to be based on very concrete tools to make this ethical framework a concrete reality. And I'd like to tell you that CAP has been supporting Colombia in establishing an ethical framework for artificial intelligence that doesn't just include these principles, but also concrete tools to implement AI in an ethical way. And the document is available and can be accessed. And I think that we need to learn to collaborate between Latin American countries, like other countries around the world, work together, because we're so similar. And that is what I'd like to ask you to do today, to collaborate more.
So governments need to work on transparency to build trust, right? But also to go the last mile, not only stay in the pilot phase. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria Isabel, for this. Massimo, you're next. In your opinion, you talked about Europe, but what can Latin American governments and societies learn from Europe's successes and failures in the application of AI to fight the pandemic?
Well, Luis, I think that many of the issues that have been raised resonate very much. I mean, when we first started in the COVID crisis, we did not work together, and it was a disaster. Then we really sort of pulled ourselves together and realized that only together as Europe and in a global effort we can succeed. And I think that that's clearly a lesson for everyone. And we should continue with that global approach. It's hugely important. The second, we are played by pilots as well, Maria Isabel. You know, it's not just Latin America. But the reason is that everybody is fascinated by the technology and they don't realize that it's the data, it's not the technology. If you don't have the data, if you don't spend a lot of the time organizing and making that data usable, and that is a lot of hard slog in many organizations, it's a big cultural change, it takes decades. So, you know, the technology is not the problem. The problem is making better use of the data. And the third thing that we have learned, and I think there's a generic thing globally, we need to be more aware individuals as much as organizations and governments on the value of the data that we generate and that we use, and in a way become more responsible, if you want, custodians of that data, and increase the value that we create around that data, but also share it more equally in society. So making sure that we don't increase the inequalities, but actually use these opportunities to try to narrow the socioeconomic gaps in society. And I think that that would be a great opportunity. And somebody said, never miss a crisis to create good opportunities.
Very, very nice quote. I think I'm gonna steal it from you, if you don't mind. Now we have a surprise for our audience today. It is my pleasure now to introduce Gabriela Ramos, who is the Assistant Director General for the Social and Human Sciences at UNESCO and former Chief of Staff at the OECD. Gabriela will give a few remarks to open the discussion. Gabriela, encantados de que nos acompañes. We're very happy.
Gabriela, we're very pleased to have you with us.
Thank you so much. And I'm actually so happy that this state of affairs in which we perform of duties allow us to jump from one place to the other. So I have been enjoying and learning from all of you and seeing my dear friends from the OECD, Andrea, Sandy, and everybody, but also seeing Constanza, who helped us with the recommendation of UNESCO on ethics of artificial intelligence. I have to say that what the panel has shown is that there is a huge promise, not only that is being realized in terms of relying on artificial intelligence to deliver faster solutions. And this is exactly what is the artificial intelligence. It's an additional intelligence that we add to our own intelligence to deliver for good. I am very impressed by the different elements that were mentioned by all the panelists. But I would take what our last panelist exposed in terms of the fact that the acceleration of the technological progress, the acceleration of artificial intelligence solutions and developments due to COVID and due to the fact that we needed to develop this infrastructure and tools to keep the economy going, to keep the society going, to keep the schools going, to keep the government going, and actually to fight the pandemic, has also increased the visibility and the importance of ethics of AI, the importance of having an international framework, a global standard framework to rule these technologies in a way that they contribute to enhancing human dignity and human rights. And I want to just add to the discussion that after working with Andy on the principles of artificial intelligence at the OECD, there are fantastic principles as were shown at the beginning. Now at UNESCO, I'm leading the work on developing this recommendation on ethics of artificial intelligence. And it's true that it's not only about, of course, what we know, the transparency, the accountability, the governance, the explainability, and the fact that the technologies need to serve the human and not the other way around. But we're also developing some very specific tools like the ethical impact assessment that needs to come with the question, because we humans ask the machines to do things for us. We need to think about what we're asking them to do, how they are asking them to do, with what data they are basing their analysis, whether it's complete, incomplete, what are the capacities, and therefore it's the human stewardship on all these technologies is paramount. But we are in Latin America. And I have to say that we have the most advanced sectors, the most advanced technological sectors, and firms and people. We see it, the quality of the speakers tell us that there's a lot of talent in the region, but it's the most unequal region in the world. And therefore, the fact is that when we talk about ethics of artificial intelligence in Latin America, it's not only about the developments, it's not only about the tools that we are having access to deliver for good, is who has access, who has the skills, who has the knowledge, who is included in the data set to deliver for some of the solutions. And therefore also in UNESCO, we have the wrong principles for the universality of internet. Let's not forget the digital 1.0 while talking digital 3.0. We need to have access to the infrastructure. We need to have broadband. We need to have the skills. We need to make sure that all these kids that are not connected to internet, that didn't have access to the school, are able to really benefit from the technologies. We need to build all the solutions that we have heard so impressive in terms of decision making, in terms of fast delivery, in terms of fighting the pandemic, in terms of protecting the users, in terms of protecting the data, because at the end we are also gathering a lot of data, but we should not leave behind so many people that doesn't even have an idea of what we're talking about. So let's not forget that. I think that to build up a very solid, robust digital world, we should not leave anyone behind. So thank you so much. I was so glad I crashed your party, but I'm very happy that I did. Thank you.
We're happy to, Gabriela. Thank you for joining, and thank you for the remarks. It's a nice segue to go into the Q&A. I think we don't have much time, but before that, I would like to ask our audience to please give our panel a big round of virtual applause. It's been very informative and insightful discussion. There is one question from Carlos Santiso, and it is directed to Jose Antonio and Director Gontijo from Chile and Brazil, respectively. And Carlos asks, how do you address the risk of data exclusion, and how can AI and data policies interrelate to make sure that AI applications are inclusive? Now, if I may, I'll give Director Gontijo, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you, Luis. The data exclusion, I do agree with Carlos. It's challenging, but the government must implement policies that improve this quality and reduce this risk. In health, for instance, in Brazil, we have the public, we call SUS, is the public health system. It's a huge, probably one of the biggest in the world. And we are moving to digitalize everything. Even the poor people that use it will have all the data over there. Of course, you have to protect the information using our LGBT, the Brazilian GDPR. And also we have also the government services being digitalized. The last result of OECD digital government report shows that Brazil is in the 16th place. So we increase a lot in our position. We have a specific secretariat that's dealing with that, organize all the government to digitalize the public services. As you have the public service digitalized, probably you have better quality of data and so on. But of course, it's challenging. You have big cities, you have very small cities with no any kind of digital information, or very fragile information. So it's 5,586 cities in Brazil. So it's challenging. Of course, it's challenging.
Thank you, Director Gontijo. Jose Antonio.
Yeah, it's similar to some things that the Director Gontijo said, but on the one hand, on our AI policy, there's a section that's specifically for ethics and all the regulatory aspects that needs to be addressed in order to have a good governance for AI. And that's something that we are right now addressing on the AI policy. And I think that all the public participation process at the beginning, and we will have a second consultation in a couple of weeks, it's part of discussing on how are we going to address that topic. And I think that's very important, since there are a lot of topics that there's not a right answer. And we've seen that along the world, and how different regions and different countries have adopted different principles and are approaching things in different ways. So one thing is on the AI policy part, and we are taking two approaches. One of them is to advance on the legal side, that is slower. And for example, we are in the Congress, there's the update of our data protection law, and it should advance hopefully in the following months. But at the same time, we are taking a different approach, is that how can we implement good practices on the industry and on the government and on data. And one example is something that a university started, and we are collaborating with the IDB. That's a project on the public purchases and how they can make all the providers of the state to adopt good practices on using data and using AI. And related to COVID itself, the work of this data roundtable has been very, very careful on only releasing the data that will not harm anyone, and on revising that data once constantly, in fact. And we are using GitHub to make it available, so anyone can pull issues and say there's something wrong with the data, can check the data, and can ask for revise or to update the data. So it's a very transparent data set. And the idea of it being transparent and to engage participation is to ensure that the data is very well curated.
Thank you, Jose Antonio. I'm sad to say, I mean, we're getting a lot of questions from the audience, but I'm sad to say that it's almost time to close our event. I want to respect everyone's schedules. If you missed all of or part of this event, we will be posting a link to the recording on our social media channels. I want to thank our audience and our panelists before handing the floor to our director, Andy Wyckoff, for his closing remarks. So thank you to the audience, to our distinguished speakers, especially for bearing with me and for the wonderful discussion. Andy, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Luis, but I can see we're gonna have to expand your job description. You've done a really excellent job today, and I want to thank you and the OECD team for this. I'm not going to try to summarize. There are some key themes, though, that came through that will haunt me for some time now. And one is collaboration is just essential to all of this. It has to be, I think Carlos's question about getting the right data footprint to train the AI effectively is a really important point. And that goes to Gabriella's point. It's great to see Gabriella, that we need to make sure everyone's data is included in this in a responsible way. And that's where we go to the human-centric approach, the ethics that UNESCO is producing, the principles that the OECD has developed. And I encourage countries to look at those, and should you be so inclined to adopt them. And for me, I think Massimo's point was spot on, and that's where I'm going to start. AI is just a technology. It really comes down to the data, and that's what we've been talking about. I think COVID provides a stress test for all of us for our thinking about how this data governance works or doesn't, and in the work we need to do collectively going forward. And with that, again, let me thank everyone who has tuned into the webinar or to the YouTube channel. We're very appreciative, and as my colleague Andrea Schall said at the beginning, this is part of a series. We welcome you participating in future OECD LAC webinars. Thank you, Luis.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, everyone. This concludes our panel.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Gracias, Luis.
Gracias. Hasta luego.
Gracias a todos.